All right, Mr. Gdansk. Time to die. Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the San Diego. This is a ship you can get completely for free this update. The In the Name of Tomorrow event has this ship available to you. Just play through the operations, and as you gain stars, at the very end, you'll get this ship completely for free. If you already have it, you get 11,000 doubloons. So this is an excellent event for everyone. I've been having a great time going through these operations. And as a final reward, sure, San Diego's not a new ship, but I think bringing one of the more fun Tier 8 premiums available to people for free is really, really cool. This ship is a cross between an Atlanta and an Austin, kind of. You get SAP here, you get a reload booster here. Although it doesn't feel quite like a Tier 8 Austin, it's still incredibly fun. You'll also notice that we have a heal on a Tier 8 cruiser. Absolutely love having heals on my cruisers. Allows me to play very aggressive here, pushing the B cap instantly in this game. Notice no carrier, no sub. It allows me to play some of these islands without getting plane spotted and then crossfired. But still, it's pretty fun to be able to play this aggressively. Our DPM is actually a little bit lower than Atlanta, funnily enough. Yet it's still strong enough to be incredible at Tier 8. SAP DPM at 274,000. It's actually more than Austin gets base at 259,000 SAP DPM. But our reload booster is worse. That's why it doesn't quite feel like an Austin. The comparable to Austin at Tier 8 for me is actually the Almirante Grau. That one has the combat instructions for a 66% reload buff for 30 seconds. The reason Austin is so extreme with its reload booster, not only is it unlimited, but it's a 75% reload booster. On San Diego here, we get a 33% reload booster, and that's for 15 seconds, half the time that we get on Grau. It's got a pretty long reload time at 180 seconds too. Fortunately though, again, that sustained DPM is actually pretty good. And you have SAP. 127mm SAP here is able to pen 36mm. So that's a lot of damage into this poor Tangshi. And because of that pen the SAP has, it's incredibly consistent damage. In fact, this has better pen angles than Austin SAP gets. Austin SAP has ricochet angles from 65 to 75 degrees. Still absolutely incredible. But San Diego is 70 to 80 degrees. We got a further 5-degree buff here. So even if you're angled completely bow on, good luck bouncing these SAP shells. It's kind of insane. The only hope you really have is at closer ranges. As you can tell from these longer ranges, we have decent shell velocity, but it's still plunging fire. 70 to 80 degree ricochet angles combined with the plunging fire. Yeah, even if you're completely bow in, these are still going to be full penning you if you have less than 36mm of armor. That all sounds insane, but it is worth mentioning that our SAP shells have nearly 1,000 less alpha damage than Austin SAP shells get. So that's another reason that Austin feels like it may burst out a lot more damage. Not only is the reload booster stronger, but each individual hit is doing a lot more damage. But having a better sustained reload is nice if you're not able to find positions to get bursty salvos in. That hit and run playstyle that I like with Austin, well, it's not as good in situations like this one, where there's a lot of targets. Sustained DPM is king in these situations. And you have that 33% reload booster for those situations where you do need to burst out a little bit more damage. It's pretty nice. As for the torpedoes here, we don't get any long-range torps like we see on Austin, but that's where it's more comparable to Atlanta. It's an Atlanta hull, and we get Atlanta torpedoes here. A little faster reload, which is nice, but 4.5 kilometers of range with good alpha damage, 16,633 alpha. It's nice at close range scenarios if you're getting rushed. It is solid. It allows you to play up close on some islands, and maybe battleships aren't able to YOLO around the corner for free on you. That's the main use case for these torpedoes, I think. Overall, they're not like Austin torps. You can torp gaps and choke points and get some random hits like that. No stealth torping here. But it's a tier 8. We get a heal, we get a booster, we get SAP at tier 8. It feels pretty good. If you're at all enjoying Atlanta at tier 7, this is definitely one to grind for. I think everybody should try and get... I think it's just a really fun ship, honestly. But especially if you enjoy that light cruiser gameplay, you should have a good time in this one. No radar, so you're losing some of that utility that Atlanta gets at tier 7, but what you gain in sustained shell flight speed is so nice. The initial velocity is the same as Atlanta, and yet we have much, much better flight times out to longer ranges. So let's say 14 kilometers. Atlanta can't even get that range, really. Here, Atlanta has a 15-second flight time with the AP, 15.4 with the HE. San Diego's a flat 10. 5 seconds faster. That is so convenient. It allows you to hit so many more shells more consistently. Austin at 9.2, a little bit more improved, but as you can tell, we're much closer to Austin shell velocity than we are to Atlanta, which maybe is a reason to play San Diego more if that's one of the main complaints you have with playing an Atlanta. It's much, much easier to lead these shells. And look, this Queen Elizabeth, poor guy, he's angling completely to our sap shells, and it doesn't matter. Sap is a pretty crazy ammo type. If you're wondering, typically, I'm not a huge fan of sap in the game, combining the consistency of high explosive with the alpha damage of AP. In this case, though, it's a lot closer to HE alpha damage, not AP, so that helps it out a lot to not feel quite so busted. Still very, very powerful, though, don't get me wrong. The HE alpha damage on an Atlanta is 1800, and the sap shells on Austin are 1800. So it's fairer in that sense, and in fact, you don't get any fire chance with these shells, where Atlanta would be getting fires, for example. So there is a bit of cost associated with running sap shells. What we see in a lot of other lines is that the sap tends to be pretty close or even higher alpha damage than AP would have. The Italian battleship line, speaking of, Caracciolo there, the sap has higher alpha damage yet than the armor piercing does on those. Pretty big difference there, and it's why I don't find San Diego sap to be too egregious in this game. And of course, San Diego has plenty of weaknesses that hold it back. Being a light cruiser, especially one that brings a tier 7 hull up to tier 8, means we have the second lowest HP of all the tier 8 cruisers. Having a heal does help make up for that, but there's no denying that some of those up tiers into tier 10, think about Shikishima heavy AP, incomparable heavy AP, one Citadel is going to do like 75% of your HP pool. That's even running the HP flag and survivability expert here. We only get 33,000 HP. That is tough to deal with, okay? And a ship like this one, you will have to play in cover. There is no buffed upper belt armor like I've always talked about on the Austin. That allows you to play at closer range, at least if they don't overmatch 32 millimeters. You can do some cheeky bouncing there. Not so in this case, although Caracciolo sap, what can you do? You basically just have to hope his dispersion is bad enough that he doesn't get too many hits. Unfortunately, we lived, and we got the torp hit that helped us survive that situation. A lot of fun to be had with San Diego in these tier 8 games. Into tier 10, we start to run into some trouble. We do have more range than the Atlanta does, but still having only 14.8 with this kind of hull does make it quite hard to play into some of those up tiers. This ship also has worse detection than an Atlanta does base, but keep in mind we're tier 8. We get access to the 5th upgrade slot now, so we can run concealment, giving us 9.3 best detection. They should allow you to sneak up to islands early game, assuming there's no carrier. You should at least be able to get to some island cover near a cap and be relatively safe from crossfires. Here, waiting patiently, not firing at the Kansas, which has 32 millimeters pretty much everywhere. We full pen him. The damage is going to be pretty good. And while there is a carrier in this one, fortunately, he's not on my flanks, so we don't have to worry about that too much. But I also want to mention the changes to aircraft spotting, and specifically the air detect range on your ship. Notice that when I fire my guns, my surface detect still blooms out to my max gun range, just like normal, but my air detect doesn't. That was one of the big changes they made with this update. And I think it's having a pretty significant effect overall. I do notice that as a light cruiser, someone playing on islands, I'm not getting air detected nearly as often. Maybe let me know in the comments down below if you've noticed that change as well. I need to play some gunboat DDs as well, see if the change is helping them too. But overall, I feel like there is less accidental spotting. If the carrier comes over and wants to spot you, sure, it's going to happen. But typically, if they're going to do that to a light cruiser here, notice our air detect matches our AA range. So they will be taking some damage. Whether or not we're able to shoot down planes, if they're just intermittently spotting us, I'm not sure. But overall, it does seem to be an improvement. Now, I do think minimap only spotting would be an even better improvement, but it seems like they're unwilling to do that, unfortunately. But this is a good solution. It is a step in the right direction overall. In this case, we're getting hydroed, so we still have to be careful. Kansas can definitely arc over these islands. This is why sometimes that's extra spotting over islands can be so painful for light cruisers, especially because open water isn't really an option for them. You're just going to get smashed by all the battleship crossfire, and your guns aren't particularly effective at those longer ranges either. You feel like you need to push up to islands close to caps, and then if you get spotted constantly while firing over them, because just planes happen to be in your area, it wasn't a very good time. So I do think this is an improvement overall. I found myself with San Diego not having to worry about things too much. We do at least have a D-fire here and a hydro, so while we don't have that option for a radar like we would see on Atlanta, not having to choose between a defensive fire and a hydro is pretty nice. 5-kilometer hydro, very useful for around islands like this, knowing if people are rushing around on you. Torpedoes can be a big issue when you have such a low HP too, so having hydro is always very nice. And having a defensive fire can help deter carriers. It's not going to stop the initial strike, of course. The AA on the Atlanta platform has been massively nerfed since the good old days of RTS carriers, where Atlanta was one of the scariest AA platforms in the game. Certainly is no longer the case. It has pitiful continuous damage and very little flak damage either. That's, I think, what used to make it so good, be so good back in the day with Atlanta AA. Unfortunate that they haven't translated that over. Now, I wanted to get back to some of these comparisons I've made to Grau in particular, but Atlanta to Austin, we've talked about them. Having a reload booster as a consumable is pretty nice here on the black, allowing us to hopefully get this kill before he smokes up or something, or not. We're just going to finish him off here, which is really nice to have that consumable. Extra DD damage when you need it, extra damage when you need it is so useful. Grau gets that as well, but it's double the buff, 66 versus 33% here on San Diego, for double the duration, 30 seconds versus 15 seconds here on San Diego. Big difference there. But it's a consumable on San Diego. You don't have any special requirement to actually charge up your buff or get back to that next buff. Where with Grau, you do need to stay dark for extended periods of time. Not always possible. You have to play around it so much more. And I think that's a really nice buff or benefit to San Diego. Sure, it's not quite as powerful, but we have way more DPM base than Grau does, so that allows us to get similar feeling DPM with the buff up. And I think a big portion of San Diego is that it's just relatively comfortable to play. Way more comfortable arcs than Atlanta, much more comfortable ability to burst out damage than Grau. You have to think about it so much less. And I think that's enough to make up for those downsides. The duration of the buff, the lack of potency on this buff, it's just so much more comfortable to play. I've been hard on San Diego in the past, especially on the sap alpha damage, I think, if I'm remembering correctly from previous videos. But playing again, I'm really glad I did, because I had a really fun time playing San Diego. In fact, I know I'm going to be playing this ship much more whenever there's tier 8 as a special mode or ranked, if I end up playing ranked. San Diego is very fun. It's like an Atlanta at this tier, but much easier to use. And having a heal, of course, you know me, having a heal allows me to play so much more aggressive. In fact, we're going to round the corner here against a Torpedoes at 6.5 kilometers. He's, of course, very distracted, so getting some of that supplemental damage is really nice. Decent damage into his superstructure. Having your ammo type be limited to SAP and AP is a little bit awkward, I would say. But your AP actually has way more pen than Atlanta AP. I think that's just down to the reduced shell drag. That's the only reason why we have so much better shell velocity. So at 10 kilometers, for example, Atlanta's only going to have 54 millimeters of AP pen, where San Diego gets up to 102, almost double. That is very useful when cruisers, light cruisers, go broadside to you. But it does mean you lack on fire chance. You don't have the ability to burn down battleships as easily. Fortunately, most of the battleships you're going to be fighting against, you're going to be able to pen with this 36 mil pen sap. Even into an Adatara here at maximum range. I don't recommend you do this. We're chasing into spawn, a battleship, and we're going to be fighting against them open water generally, especially once our Duncan goes down eventually. It's not easy to do, and I would not recommend you play like this. But considering our shell velocity buffs over Atlanta, it can make it work just a little bit. It is actually possible. And maybe it's that improved pen angles, even from the SAP that we see on Austin, up to 70 to 80 degree pen angles on the San Diego SAP is what also allows us to just get so many more full pens without having to deal with ricochets. Most of the shells we hit there were shatters if we weren't dealing damage, just because we were hitting gun turrets, anything like that. And as for this In the Name of Tomorrow event, I gotta say, this is just such a well done event. The more I've learned about it, the more I've played with it, the more I've enjoyed it. There are absolutely no sneaky tricks here to try and make you play longer or backload all of the difficulty on earning the San Diego. It really comes down to playing these new operations, Arctic Convoy, Tokyo Express, Pacific Offensive, and it doesn't matter which one you're playing, you're earning stars towards all of these episodes. There's 4 chapters to get through, and any stars you earn on any of those operations get you progress. Doesn't matter what week you're playing, you're always going to be earning progress. They didn't do something like lock first chapter progress to the first operation of Arctic Convoy or something like that. Nope, doesn't matter. Just play the game and you'll slowly work your way through it. Really, really well done here, and I'm so happy that we have an event like this. And it's also for experienced players who already have a San Diego. You get 11,000 doubloons. And we even have Black Friday coming up, so it could be worth saving those doubloons for that. You're also earning doubloons throughout these next few updates towards Christmas, so pretty good times for World of Warships. Very, very happy with how things are progressing. Although now that I bring up Black Friday, I should mention, last year they didn't release every Black Friday ship for doubloons. The ones you wanted, of course, John Bard, Massachusetts, there were a couple others that are a little bit rare. You can only buy for real money in the shop. They didn't offer them for an in-game doubloon purchase. So worth mentioning that. We've also seen them change, more standardize, I guess, the pricing of each premium ship per tier. So that may also factor into changed prices. Black Friday may not look the same this year. I'm a little worried about that. We'll see what happens when we get there, though. For now, though, they're giving out a lot of doubloons this update, and well as San Diego being an excellent ship to get completely for free by playing this In the Name of Tomorrow event. I made it through the first 2 stages already. Didn't take me too long to progress, and any of these operations, whatever operation is running, and they will rotate after the 3rd week, and that goes till September 17th, I believe. You'll have to finish all 4 of these chapters, and then you'll get yourself the San Diego. That's how it works. Pretty simple, player friendly, excellent. A lot of effort put into some of these animations here too. I really just can't say enough good things about this overall. As for the build that I was running here, looks a little something like this. Had a lot of points left over. That's why you're seeing more lower skill level points here. I really wanted to get Survivability Expert and Superintendent for surviving. More HP, more heals, more reload boosters too. You only get 2 of them base. And then extra DPM AR, heavy HE, and SAP for the SAP damage here, of course. And then Concealment. I would have loved to incorporate top grade. Maybe even a Defense and ASW Expert for that 50% consumable prep time. But you only get 3 of these, right? It's not unlimited, so you can burst through them relatively quickly, especially if you're using that reload reduction skill. It's got quite a long reload here, and that's fine enough. Your sustained DPM is good enough to be more than usable, and then use this as a little extra bonus. 33% is noticeable, but it's not insane like Austin, where you go from pretty bad DPM to, oh my goodness, he's going to burst through 50k HP of my battleship or something like that, which is really fun. It doesn't quite feel the same, but it's much more consistent, much easier to play in that regard. You're not forced to do the bursty thing all the time. Here's the upgrades I was using. Pretty standard stuff. Getting access to Concealment mod is what allows us to have such good concealment, even though the base detect does get worse than Atlanta. This is a very powerful skill to have at tier 8. That is a massive power spike, of course. But that's it for San Diego. Now, a quick look at it again in 2025. Really happy they picked this one for the operation for the In the Name of Tomorrow event, because I think it's really fun to play, and more people should have access to something like this. Atlanta is one of my favorites at tier 7, and now I think San Diego is becoming a really fun one to just hop in and play at tier 8. You do have to suffer through some of those up tiers, though. I haven't mentioned that as much throughout this video. I think I got a little bit lucky on Matchmaker. But tier 8 does struggle with a lot of up tiers these days into tier 10. And that, of course, means very passive games, where even with your improved velocity and range over Atlanta, you're still not anywhere close to being able to impact most of those battles, since everyone plays so far back at high tier these days. But let me know what you think in the comments down below about this event and San Diego. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.